Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
We have a bunch of news today, most of it dealing with Microsoft and Windows on the security side. So we'll just start right away with our standard disclaimer that we both work for Microsoft. And Adam, if you want to just run through it real quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to shorten it because I'm sure our listeners and viewers have heard it many times. Andy and I both work for Microsoft in our field security sales. We did survive the recent round of layoffs. We do this show outside of work on our own time and with our own funding. So although we do work for Microsoft and want to stay in the good graces of our employer, this does not represent the opinions or views of Microsoft Corporation. It's the views of Adam and Andy. And with that, on with the show.
All right. So the first bit of news, which is really exciting, is Microsoft is putting out a private preview of the new build, which will have the antivirus moved out of the kernel, essentially. So in a very, very high level. And basically, this was the result of the CrowdStrike incident, where there was a faulty update that took down about 8.5 million Windows-based machines globally. And Microsoft doesn't want this to ever happen again. So last year, Microsoft held a summit with all these security vendors, and they told them, hey, this is the plan going forward. We're going to stop kernel level drivers, because that's what happened at the CrowdStrike incident. It was a kernel level driver that was updated, and it caused the blue screen of death, which is going away. It's our next bit of news, but 8.5 million machines globally blue screened, and that was a problem. And so now Microsoft is releasing this private preview of Windows that will move this AV and EDR applications out of the Windows kernel. This is a collaboration. So this is not Microsoft telling the vendors this is how it's going to be. This is very much a collaboration with the security vendors, and it's a build it together type thing. And so all the security vendors are going to have access to this private preview to test their applications, make changes if needed. And there's a lot of them that are on board. CrowdStrike, Bitdefender, ESET, Trend Micro, a lot of other security vendors are on board and going to be testing this private preview with their solutions. And for a long time, this was the way that everyone used the security software. It was deeply rooted into the Windows machine and running at that kernel level. But what happened last year was basically a wake-up call. So Microsoft is starting with the AV and EDR drivers, but there are other kernel level drivers. Specifically, one of the big ones that a lot of people use Windows machines are gamers, and the anti-cheat machines that pop up for Fortnite, for Call of Duty, whatever. Those also run at the kernel level. And of course, I think a lot of the game developers would love to get away from kernel level drivers. And the problem is that it's a little bit more complicated because cheaters have purposely tampered with their machines to disable protections and get those cheat engines running. And so there's going to be a little bit of more work, but starting with AV and EDR, that's going to be a great start. And then Microsoft is going to progressively try and attack these other use cases and work with those developers to see if there's a way to get their drivers out of the kernel level. So I think for years, there's still going to be kernel level drivers. It's not like this is the end of all kernel level drivers, but it's a really good start. And, I'm excited to see where else we're going to go with this.
There's a great quote, and I forget who it's from, but the gist of it is that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You got to start somewhere. And I know there will be a lot of comparisons to what Apple has done with Mac OS and moving kernel extensions out of mainstream support in Mac OS and moving to the systems extension model. There are some parallels here. I know from talking to some folks, like our recently retired Brett Arsenault, former CISO of Microsoft, this is actually going to be a much more substantial effort than what Apple did, both just in terms of scope and scale, but also in terms of how hardcore this is going to be and how restrictive this is going to be. So this is a big change for sure. And obviously, AV and EDR are a logical place to start because we have seen how that affects resilience. And for the most part, not to be flippant, but I am less concerned about the resilience of gaming machines than I am like machines that run the world, run airlines, run banking, run systems people rely on every day. So this is a logical place to start. And it's good to hear this is a collaborative effort and that everyone's on board. Or almost everyone. I did note a couple of exceptions in the names you rattled off. Didn't hear SentinelOne, didn't hear Palo Alto. I thought that was mildly interesting, but they'll get on board sooner than later, or their customers will demand them to. Because I think one thing I really zeroed in on when we talked about the CrowdStrike incident now, basically a year ago, was we as cyber defenders need to recognize that part of our job is resilience. When we think of the CIA triumvirate of cybersecurity, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and that is such a huge part of our remit as cyber defenders. Of course, we need to deliver systems that are secure, but they need to be available. And one of the points I made last summer when this CrowdStrike incident happened was that the medication appeared to be worse than the disease. And so this is a great step forward where we can continue to secure systems, but in a way where we're also ensuring resiliency. That's a great step forward. Excited to see where this goes. More to come.
Yeah, and I hinted to this next part because Microsoft is actually getting rid of the famous blue screen of death. So everyone who's worked in IT, if you're using a Windows computer, at some point you've probably experienced a BSOD, as it's fondly called. And so this BSOD, the blue screen of death, has been around for 40 years for Microsoft. And now Microsoft is getting rid of it. And it's going to be a little bit more simplified, a lot more like the black screen that you see during a Windows update. So now it's pivoting towards that. And it will list the stop code and faulty system driver that you normally wouldn't always see during a crash dump. And so this new BSOD design, and we can still use the acronym BSOD because it is the black screen of death now, in an update to Windows 11 late this summer, alongside the new quick machine recovery feature, which is designed to quickly restore machines that can't boot. And so, just a little cosmetic update. I'm glad we can still use the BSOD acronym, but it will feel a little weird, having worked in IT all this time, to say black screen of death versus blue screen of death.
Absolutely. And Andy, we were talking on the pre-show, and I mentioned I have a machine running a Windows Insider build, and Windows Insider builds, of course, have a green screen of death to delineate they're not running the production software. And so those are a little more expected because we're still smashing bugs in those releases. And so it was weird as we were talking black screen of death, blue screen of death, green screen of death moving forward. So it's probably time with the very visceral projection of blue screens literally everywhere last July with the CrowdStrike incident. That's the time to rebrand, I think. So it's good timing. And with all the other efforts, you mentioned the new quick machine recovery feature. We just talked about moving EDR and AV solutions out of the kernel drivers, some really good improvements to the resiliency of Windows. And so hopefully this will be even less of a frequent occurrence than it's already gotten. Any of us who've been in technology long enough, we can admit, even if you're a Microsoft hater, we see a lot fewer blue screens today than we ever used to. I mean, Windows really has gotten pretty gosh darn resilient over time. I see a lot less of them personally. So hopefully we see even less of this moving forward, but definitely a change for our listeners and viewers to be aware of.
And this next one, again, I was talking with my dad last week, and he's looking for a new PC that can run Windows 11. All of his PCs, which he has multiple ones, which is not surprising. The son of someone who was into computers is now in tech. So he's got multiple computers, but they're all generally older. He runs a lot of Linux machines on them, but also he runs Windows. And so they're all Windows 10, and none of them are able to support Windows 11 upgrade natively within the Windows application. And, I said, hey, there's this new announcement, which is part of the news here that I learned of, which is Microsoft is allowing the ESUs, or the extended security updates, for free for anyone who will sync their PC settings to a Microsoft account and use the new Windows backup update, the backup app. And of course, my dad is very old school. He's like, I'm not going to sign into the cloud. The cloud is bad. It will steal all your information. And so I'm like, well, if you don't want to do that, there still is that $30 option. Again, this is for consumers. So, we're talking consumers here. And I'm like, if you choose not to sign in, you can pay the $30. Mainstream support still stops on October 14th. Also, I learned that you could pay 1,000 Microsoft reward points for this. And Adam, actually, you were the one, I think, long ago who told me about these reward points. And if you're not aware of reward points, and you can expand on this, Adam, but like essentially you get reward points for doing a lot of different things. And the most basic thing is if you're signed into a browser and you go to bing.com, sign in with your Microsoft account, and you just use Bing as your like search engine, you just build reward points. And there's like little games that you can do as well. But with these reward points, you can get gift certificates like to Amazon and Xbox or whatever. There's a lot of different things you can spend the reward points on. 1,000 reward points to basically get your security updates for free for $30. That's like nothing. It's I think I have like over close to 30,000 reward points, although I don't usually spend them. They just build. So anyways, basically TLDR, if you sign in to Windows and use the backup app, you're going to get the ESUs for free. If you don't want to do that, you can pay $30 or spend the 1,000 reward points. And again, this is just for security updates. It's not to fix bugs. It's not for new features. It's just if there is a security patch, you will get that. And it's only for a year for consumers. So we want to get to Windows 11 if at all possible. And it's funny because I was like, hey, Dad, why don't you just try like a bare metal install? Because I think you can probably just, trick the computer into doing a bare metal install. Maybe. I haven't tried it on a machine that I haven't been able to upgrade. Maybe it'll detect the settings and say you can't do it. But I suggested to do that. And he's like, well, I got so much information on here that I need to like recover and back up. And I'm like, oh, you got to drag it to a hard drive or something like that. This is like, we're literally still stuck in like the non-cloud days. So it was kind of funny.
That is funny. I think you did a great summary. We're talking consumers, consumer extended security updates. As Andy mentioned, not extended support, extended security updates, 1 year only. Enterprises have availability to get years 2 and 3. Consumers do not, 1 year. So this gets you to October 2027. You still have to go to Windows 11 at some point. $30, sign into the Windows settings and Windows backup app, or 1,000 Microsoft reward points. So you've got options for how to get this. So great if you want to buy yourself more time, kind of see how things shake out. Maybe wait for that second generation of Copilot Plus PCs. Although I have to say, these first gen devices are incredible. I love my Surface Laptop 7. But either way, it's just great to have options, to have that optionality for how you want to handle it. If the finances are not conducive to getting a new PC this year, this buys you time. So good for everyone to know. And Andy, just to expand on Microsoft reward points briefly, basically to incentivize you to use Bing, and then also Game Pass on Xbox are kind of the big two drivers there. And it's one of those, there's a whole community around earning these and making it as easy as possible to earn them. I certainly do. I have now, since I really got serious about this probably a year and a half ago, have already redeemed 2 $100 Xbox gift certificates, and I have like 65,000 points of the 90,000 I need to get my third. So almost $300 in Xbox gift cards at this point, just by essentially firing up an app on your phone. Like when you wake up in the morning and go click a couple things, it's pretty easy. Fire up your Xbox and play a game for 15 minutes and you get credit. Play a PC game for 15 minutes, you get more credit. Play a thing on Game Pass, you get more credit. So it's pretty easy to do. And I know anybody's going to roll their eyes at the two Microsoft guys and you should really use Bing, but seriously, like if you haven't done it recently, and I know I'm a company man, but I switched my default search engine years ago, and I know it's cool and trendy to hate on Bing, but honestly, it's good. It's fine. I never think like these results stink, I should go try a Google search and see if it's better. That never happens. And so it is nice to be rewarded. As Andy mentioned, you get 5 points for every search you do through Bing. And so if you just set your default to it, you can just passively rack up reward points just for doing web searches through your day-to-day work. And especially if you're a listener of this show and you're involved in some capacity with the Microsoft ecosystem. Obviously, our search engine has crawled our docs really, really well, and is great at returning results on Microsoft Learn and that sort of thing. I'm always kind of surprised when customers ask questions about documentation and they seem to be struggling to find it. I don't know if Google hasn't crawled it as well or what, but it's very easy for me to find what they're looking for right away, usually with a single search. So maybe for your work you do, it may just be more relevant and better results for that. But hey, I mean, you can earn literal passive points just by doing what you already do. And that's kind of cool too.
All right. Our final story is Microsoft announced a new update orchestration platform for Windows. And I thought this was super interesting because, as we know, Windows users, every time we launch an application, that application will update independently. Like Discord is a good example. I use that daily, and sometimes there's an update and then I have to relaunch the app and whatnot, or Visual Studio or something, right? Like every time you launch it, Audacity, we use Audacity for recording. And when we launch it, it says, hey, there's a new update and you have to install the update. And otherwise, that software will sit on your machine in a non-updated fashion, which, interesting enough, I have my MacBook joined with Intune for work. And I do have Visual Studio on my MacBook. And every now and then, the Defender vulnerability, endpoint protection will scan it. And then Microsoft has, as part of their process, they actually launch a text file on the MacBook and say, hey, you have this software that's out of date. You need to update it. And so Python, I had like an older version of Python, I had an older version of Visual Studio, and it kept on telling me like, hey, you need to update these things. So I had to like independently go and click on the application and then update it. Python, I had to download a new version. But this new orchestration platform is supposed to try to unify that update experience. So developers will be able to sign on to this platform and deliver their updates for their applications through the Windows Update platform, which I think will be a nicer experience. Well, one of the things, and we were talking about this in the pre-show, that I had in my mind was, Windows Update doesn't happen all that often. It's once a month. And, one of the things that we actually moved out of the Windows Update platform was Edge, because we wanted to be more agile. It's based on the Chromium open source project now. And there are security updates that happen a lot more often, sometimes multiple times, a week, multiple times a day, even depending on what they find. And Windows Update just wasn't keeping up with that. Now, as we talked about in the show or in the pre-show, the timing for those updates don't necessarily have to be the same as Windows Update cadence. Like Windows Update cadence is once a month, as we all know, but maybe they'll deliver it, third week or whatever. Whenever they have an update that they want to push out, it's just going to use the Windows Update platform, and you'll see it in Windows Update, and then you can just do the update right there, which I think that's a really nice experience. It's similar to like on a phone, iOS or Android, you get all your updates through the App Store. Again, developers will have to sign on to this program and like deliver their updates through the Windows Update platform. But I think this is great. Again, this is Microsoft will scan all the updates, make sure that there's distributed correctly. And this whole program right now is in the early stages right now, but this is something that is coming. And I'm pretty excited about this because I think it's going to be a really good experience overall.
If there's a theme for today's show, it's resilience. And I think this is, again, a resilience effort. Because if you think about how updates have traditionally been delivered for applications on Windows, the answer has been to developers, roll your own. So Chrome, when you install Chrome, it installs an agent that sole purpose of existence is to check for Chrome updates. You install Microsoft Office, has its own update mechanism that's independent of Windows Update. You mentioned Edge has its own update client. The Adobe suite has its own update mechanism. Apple updates its software through its own mechanism. Although a lot of Apple apps today are now available on the Microsoft Store, which, by the way, this does not impact. If you're getting anything on the Microsoft Store and you like that seamless update experience, that will continue. What this is for is effectively to get rid of all those other agents. So Chrome doesn't need its own agent. Apple doesn't need its own agent. Adobe doesn't need its own agent. Instead, and this is optional, but I think organizations, software developers would be wise to snap to this. It allows you to snap into a really robust, really proven update mechanism that now has awareness of when the system is idle, when updates should be applied, what other updates are happening at the same time. Because it's certainly possible, because you have all these different software agents that independently go check for updates, they could all be trying to do their same thing at once. If you have ever booted up a PC that's been sitting idle for a long time, everything pops up at the same time. I need to update. I need to update. I need to update. And it's like, whoa, slow down. I can only update so many things at once. If that all ran through a unified update mechanism, then those updates could happen sequentially as opposed to simultaneously, which is going to be a better approach too. Or it can even batch updates that these can be done without rebooting. These are all pending reboot, and then do a single reboot that installs all of the updates all at once. It's very easy to see why this would deliver a better user experience, but also a better update experience as well. And I think that's the goal. Again, early days, but what this does not require is it doesn't require developers to move apps into the Microsoft Store, because if they do, they already get these benefits. This is for developers that don't want to or cannot do that. And this, again, I think long-term would be a great experience. We'll see how much the software developers do adapt it and adopt this model, but having it out there as a extensible system that they can snap to, I think is the right approach. And I would actually love to see Apple adopt this on macOS as well, because again, it's a very similar setup. You do have the App Store on macOS, but a lot of things don't use the App Store because various reasons, Apple's draconian policies, blah, blah, blah. And so then if you have stuff installed outside the App Store, you don't get that update mechanism. You don't get all the benefits of that. And so it would be like Apple developing a unified update mechanism independent of the store. Now, I don't think Apple will ever do that because they're too dependent on services revenue, and that's a whole other discussion for another time. But here, Microsoft is doing that. And I think that's really, really exciting. And it's one of those things that it benefits end users, and it benefits software developers, and it benefits the security and resilience of our systems. So this is win-win-win across the board. Excited to hear more about this as it develops. I imagine Andy will be recording a show maybe next year sometime. I'll go, hey, remember that thing we talked about? Yeah, it's in a Canary build now, or it's in an Insider build, and we'll be excited to kind of learn more about it. But this is a good idea. I asked Andy in the pre-show if this was even being spearheaded by our team, David Weston's team, that's been doing a lot of the Windows security, and it isn't. But I can imagine they're very pleased with this development, because getting rid of all those wonky agents that are all separately checking and unifying that, again, huge. So really positive news, really exciting, just a lot of good news. This is a good week of news, I think, Andy, after kind of a bummer show a week ago. Some really positive developments across the board that I think are going to positively benefit end users and admins, and excited to see where these go.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching and listening as always. Our contact information, along with the links to the stories that we talked about, will be in the show notes. If you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future, just email us. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.